For the Sake of My Children, a novel by Dr. A. Ahmed. This is an intriguing epic story which resonates with love, resilience, courage, and sacrifice. Copyrights. All rights are reserved. No part of this book may be reproduced, stored in a retrieval system, or transmitted in any form or by any means without the prior written permission of the author, except by a reviewer, who may quote brief paragraphs for a review to be printed in a public newspaper, general magazine, school journal, or university article. This novel narrates the life story of an Australian girl who fell in love with a Saudi man. Then she converted to Islam, married her Arab lover, and traveled with him to the Islamic world. This book is a work of fiction, but the entire story is based on a true love affair between a former Christian girl and a Muslim immigrant. All names, characters, places, and events are either the product of the author's imagination or used literary. Therefore, any resemblance to actual people, living or dead, events, or locales is merely coincidental. Chapter 20. The Guardian of Children Who Became a Wolf. During her imprisonment, the Australian mother, Irshad Al-Shamari, was thinking day and night about her 7 children. She never expected that she would be away from them for more than a few days or a couple of weeks. She deliberately lied to Mullah Muhammad Abu Hamid, whom she left her children with him as their guardian, by telling him that she would go to her country, Australia, permanently. But in her heart, she was planning to go to Pakistan and seek help from her Australian embassy in Islamabad city and return to pick up her children. She thought her embassy would accept her application and issue Australian passports, foreign visas, and free airline tickets for her and her 7 children. When her embassy rejected her request, the Australian widow decided to return to those detention camps in Afghanistan and marry Mullah Muhammad Abu Hamid. She decided to marry an old geezer of her grandfather's age in order to live with her children. Unfortunately, troubles with 2 of her captors at the Holy Mountain Shrine and an evil usurper in the village altered the course of her plan and separated her from her young, loved ones for over 12 months. During this long time, her 7 children were turned into slaves and beggars by their caretaker and guardian, who became a humanoid wolf and began devouring them. Mullah Muhammad Abu Hamid, like any other religious leader, does not spend a single night in the tents of those infernal camps. He lives in his big house in the city of Kandahar that looks like a palace. He comes every morning to the camps of the Mujahideen on the outskirts of Kandahar city. He spends his day teaching and training the 100 Mujahideen entrusted to him, and late in the evening, he drives back to his house in the city in his private car. He has his own chauffeur. His house is like a big mansion with many rooms. All his Afghan wives and their children and grandchildren live with him in his mansion. When Irshad left her children with him, he made her 3 daughters unpaid maidservants to his wives and married her eldest daughter, Aisha, who was 10 years old. Concerning her 3 sons, he sends 2 of them every morning to the main market in downtown Kandahar city and forces them to work and sometimes beg for food. He did not send them food nor give them money to buy their 3 meals, but to work from sunrise to sunset and buy their own food out of pocket. If the 2 sons find no one to employ them, they must either starve or beg the people to give them alms or crumbs from their leftovers. Sometimes, when they could not get work or money through begging, the 2 children were driven to steal in order to quench their pangs of hunger. They were arrested several times and flogged by the Islamic police in the main market. This is what the evil mullah did to the Australian white woman's 7 children while she was imprisoned in Kandahar Central Prison for Women. Upon her release, the Australian mother was escorted by 3 prison guards in a police wagon to downtown Kandahar, and they left her there. From there, she has to walk for a few hours to reach the Mujahideen camps. It was midday when Irshad got out of the police iron cage. Mother Irshad counted the time minute by minute, her steps as fast as her heartbeats. She wants to grow wings, fly through the air, land in the Mujahideen camps, and meet and cuddle her 7 children. She misses them so much and knows her children will miss her too. Although it was not her fault, Irshad still feels guilty and holds herself responsible for the long separation between them and their mother. In her heart, she still trusts the venerable Sheikh Mullah Muhammad Abu Hamid. She believes he is taking the trouble to take care of the 7 children who are not his offspring. She decided to thank him very much and apologize for her unexpected delay. For the welfare and upbringing of her 7 young children, the Australian widow decided to marry the honorable old geezer, Mullah Muhammad Abu Hamid. She considered him the caretaker and faithful guardian of her 7 children. Therefore, she does not want to separate her children from the man who has become their adoptive father and spiritual guardian and will soon be husband to their beloved mother who loves them more than herself. The freed white prisoner, the Australian widow Irshad Al-Shamari, arrived at the Mujahideen camps in the late afternoon. She was sweating terribly and feeling as if she walked through the valley of shadow of death to reach those concentration death camps where she was imprisoned for 5 years with her late Saudi husband and their 7 children. The Australian white mother did not see any major changes that occurred in her long absence from the death camps. Everything is same and everyone is the same, with the same dirty environment and the same miserable people. Every male is a fully armed terrorist, even if he is a child, and every female is exploited as a sex slave and abused, even if she is a mere child. The only noticeable change she finds is that her old tent, which she used to live in with her 7 children as dolls in a toy box, is now occupied by another Muslim family. When she inquired about her 3 sons and 4 daughters, she was told that they live in the city with their guardian, the virtuous Imam Mullah Muhammad Abu Hamid. Then the foreign white widow looked for the mullah until she found him in the training ground. As soon as Prince Abu Hamid saw her, his bearded face revealed that he was annoyed to see the white woman, Irshad Al-Shamari, once again standing in front of his desk in his office. Then the Australian foreign lady respectfully greeted him and apologized for the delay, which was caused by unforeseen circumstances and beyond her control. She decided not to tell anyone about her suffering in the village of Sharaf al-Banat and her imprisonment in Kandahar city. At first, the evil mullah tried to convince the white foreign mother to forget her 7 Muslim children and go to her native country, Australia. Irshad strongly rejected this advice and demanded custody of her 7 children. She told him that she would rather die than leave her children and travel home alone. Then Mullah Abu Hamid accused her of neglect and told her that she had deserted her 7 children, threw them in his arms, and fled to her country, Australia, to find a white dick of an uncircumcised Christian infidel man to have sex with her uncircumcised hairy pussy. He claimed that she was a racist white woman, so she refused to marry him because he was an Afghani Muslim man who has a circumcised cock like the circumcised dick of the Prophet Muhammad, may God bless him and grant him peace, about whom his beloved child wife, Aisha, said that he could control his phallus. When the mullah accused her of racism, abandonment, desertion of her 7 children, and escaping to her motherland for selfish and lustful motives, the Australian woman was forced to reveal the troubles she faced in the cursed village of Sharaf al-Banat with its notorious womanizer chief and her imprisonment in the infernal Kandahar women's prison. Then the dirty pedophile old man who loves to have sex with children reminded the white mother, Irshad, of the letter of her late Saudi husband, the gallant martyr Mustafa, in which he wrote that if his Australian widow wants to live in the Mujahideen camps, she should marry a devout Muslim man. Her late husband had nominated him to be the guardian of his 7 Muslim children and a husband to his white wife. But in no uncertain terms, she should not be allowed to remove his 7 Muslim children from the Mujahideen camps and take them to live among the Christian infidels in Australia. Therefore, the mullah told her that she could not be allowed to have custody of her children back and remain in the camps unless she agreed to marry a devout kicker of the Mujahideen. The evil leader predicted that the racist white foreign woman would not agree to marry any Afghan Taliban terrorist, even if he were the last man in the world. Therefore, he wanted to dissuade her and make her flee again and return to her western homeland. Despite this, the Australian mother refused to follow the words of Mullah Muhammad Abu Hamid and demanded custody of her children. When the evil man refused to return the 7 children to her as their mother, Irshad sought the intervention and assistance of another mullah Amir leader who is higher in rank than the Mullah Muhammad Abu Hamid. Through this second high terrorist prince, the Australian mother learned that her first daughter, Aisha Mustafa al-Shamari, had married her guardian, the Honorable Mullah Muhammad Abu Hamid, a year ago. With regard to her 6 other Muslim children, the elder mullah decided that the white foreign mother could regain custody of her children because Islam forbids adopting them through Prince Mullah Muhammad Abu Hamid. He then advised that the widow, Irshad, try to find a devout Muslim man and marry him. The heartbreaking and unbelievable news of her daughter being kidnapped and raped by her caretaker has turned the Australian mother into a madwoman. Therefore, she became so angry and determined to kill the kidnapper and abuser of her innocent child, Aisha. Her righteous anger against the rapist of her minor daughter, the devil Muhammad Abu Hamid, prompted her to attack him in front of the Grand Prince and other mujahideen. Her anger doubled when she learned that he had married her 10-year-old daughter when he was a 70-year-old geezer. She grabbed his long beard and started hitting and kicking him with all her might. She described him as a kidnapper, rapist, and child molester. When the other mujahideen got over the shock, they detained the angry white mother and forcibly separated her from the old Mullah Abu Iblis Hamid. Despite this, the angry white woman continued to fight back, calling the abuser of her child bad names and accusing him of not being a good Muslim. She also accused the other senior mullah of being a bad religious leader because he ruled that she could not have her underage daughter Aisha because she had already become a legitimate Muslim wife to her Muslim husband, Mullah Muhammad Abu Hamid. And he tasted her honey, and she tasted his sweetness. Then the brave foreign mother, Irshad, threatened to kill the senior mullah and the despicable Mullah Abu Hamid if they did not allow her to return her minor daughter to her custody. To control her, the big mullah ordered some men to fetch ropes and tie up the mad, angry white woman who was behaving as a white witch and dirty bitch. They described her as having become an apostate Muslim woman and reverting to being an unclean infidel Christian lady as she was before she married her Muslim husband, the martyr hero Mustafa al-Shamari. They claimed that she was converted to Christianity again during her return to the land of the infidels, Australia. They accused her of apostasy because she refused to accept God's kismet and division of her Muslim daughter, Aisha, who was married in a permissible Islamic marriage with the venerable Mullah Sheikh Abu Hamid, may God bless him. As a result, the outraged Australian widow was restrained with strong ropes as if she had become a dangerous madwoman. They tied her hands and feet just like a lunatic person. Then 4 terrorists carried her bound body and threw her in a tent, and 2 armed mujahideen guarded her around the clock. Meanwhile, the Mullah Abu Hamid carried out the orders of the senior mullah and brought back the children of the white mother who was imprisoned in her tent the next day. Irshad is still bound in the ropes when one of the terrorists brings her children. When she saw her 6 children, the Australian mother could not believe her eyes that the children standing before her were her offspring, whom she left a year ago with Mullah Abu Hamid as their guardian. Their bodies were emaciated, and their miserable faces revealed that they had been starved, beaten, and abused for many months. They're in dirty rags. Some of them are barefoot. The heartbroken loving mother, Irshad, started crying when she saw the miserable conditions of her 6 children. Then she called them and asked them to embrace her. When they approached her, she smelled their stench as if they had been brought to her from outside the filthy sewers. The grieving mother Irshad wept like a child and begged her 6 children to forgive her for leaving them with the evil mullah and traveling to Pakistan. She could not tell them what happened to her while she was away. The miserable conditions of her remaining children prompted the imprisoned mother, Irshad, to concede and compromise with the senior mullah and to postpone her revenge on the evil Mullah Muhammad Abu Hamid. The Australian foreign woman also fears that the 2 wicked Afghan mullahs will fabricate the crime of apostasy from Islam, which they accused her of, and of converting to Christianity and returning to the religion of her Australian Christian family. In this case, she will be killed as an apostate Muslim woman who has become an impure Christian infidel. She will be beheaded with a double-edged sword, and her 3 innocent sons will be left orphans begging for food in the streets of Kandahar city. Her 3 remaining daughters will be married to illiterate mujahideen from the Taliban group or Al-Qaeda fighters and give birth to terrorists. Her 3 sons may also become terrorists and blow up their bodies in jihad for the sake of God, as their terrorist father, Mustafa, did against innocent Americans in New York. Accordingly, the foreign mother begged the senior Grand Emir to forgive her, release her, and allow her to take care of her 6 children as a Muslim mother who wants to raise them in the city of Kandahar among the righteous mujahideen families who are the only true followers of Islam in the entire world. Mullah al-Sheikh al-Kabir accepted her apology and allowed her to live in the camps as a single mother widow without forcing her to marry another Muslim man unless she wanted to do so of her own accord. However, under no circumstances is the Australian mother allowed to take her Muslim children out of the mujahideen camps even if they are sick or dying of starvation. Despite this, the anger of a white Australian foreign mother, Irshad, against the kidnapper and rapist of her minor daughter, Aisha, did not leave her heart for even a second. She cries day and night and always prays to God to free her underage daughter from the sexual exploitation of the pedophile old man who loves to have sex with minor girls. Meanwhile, the so-called legal Afghan Muslim husband of her kidnapped child, Aisha, refused to allow the Australian mother to see or visit her minor daughter who lives with him and his 3 Afghan Muslim wives and their sons and daughters in his large palace in a luxurious neighborhood in downtown Kandahar city. Although the evil Mullah Muhammad Abu Hamid refused to allow her to see or visit her daughter, Aisha, yet the compassionate Australian mother, who had been terribly abused in the Muslim world, continued to believe that one day the loving God of heaven would perform a miracle and release her and her 6 remaining children from the mujahideen camps in Afghanistan and send them to Australia, where she was born and raised by loving and anointed Christian parents. But as the days and months passed, the white foreign widowed mother, Irshad al-Shamari, lost hope in such divine intervention. Chapter 21. The Divine Exodus from Hell of Islam. The white girl Irshad is sitting in front of her tent and looking at her 6 little children with many hot tears welling up in her beautiful eyes. She is feeling extremely hot from the scorching sun and the Islamic burqa which wrapped her body from head to toe. She can see her children through a small hole in her niqab, which is as small as an eye of a needle. She is suffering from a strong suicidal mood. She is deeply immersed in her suicidal thoughts, which have been haunting her for several months. She tried many times to end her life, but she was always prevented by the fear of leaving her children orphans and begging for food on the streets of Kandahar city. If it is not for her children, she would have shot herself in the head and ended it all and got out of her hellish life in the Muslim world. Irshad knows for sure that her 3 young sons will grow up as terrorists and blow their bodies to shreds for the holy cause of Islamic jihad. Her 3 daughters are also expected to be forced to marry Taliban mujahideen men and give birth to more Muslim terrorists. To avoid these unpleasant consequences, she decided to return to Australia, where she was born and raised. Unfortunately, her Australian embassy in Islamabad city refused to give her a passport because she had been associated with Muslim terrorists for many years. The only escape that Irshad thought of was to end her life and leave that miserable and hellish life. She even entertained the idea of killing her own children with her. Irshad could not believe that a day would come in her life when she would turn to such an inhumane thought of trying to kill her children. Even animals do not kill their young. The white girl knows in her native country that all care and education will be provided for her 6 children so that they will grow up as good citizens. In Afghanistan, her sons will not avoid their fate of being raised as terrorists and her daughters being illiterate and marrying Taliban fighters. The Australian girl recalled how her parents and friends tried to prevent her from marrying an immigrant Muslim boy. At that time, she was blinded by her intense love for her Arab colleague. In those days, she would see her Muslim friend as an angel who came down from heaven to give her the love and joy she longed for. She liked his reddish Arab complexion and his height. She enjoyed hearing his accent when he spoke English. She liked the way he spoke and walked. She found her lover Mustafa very polite and loving. Everything she loves in a man she found in her Arab boyfriend. He became her English lover Romeo, and she became his British beloved Juliet, or her mad lover Kays, and she was his beloved Arab girlfriend, Layla. In a brief time, he became her idol, and she worshipped him. Everything he wanted her to do, she did for him. He made her abandon her family, friends, and country, and she traveled with him to his homeland in Saudi Arabia. She even left her Christian faith and converted to Islam. In the end, her Arab boyfriend Mustafa changed her name from Susan to Irshad and married her. However, long after she was released from the infernal women's prison in Kandahar city and resided with her 6 children for a few months in their tiny tent that was smaller than a phone booth and dirtier than a public toilet in the third world, the Australian widow Irshad Al-Shamari witnessed the airstrikes on the Mujahideen camps carried out by the NATO forces jointly with the US and British Air Forces. Everyone she knows in those camps has either been blown to pieces by those huge bombs, lost a leg or hand, or gone deaf and dumb. Every hut and tent in the camps caught fire. Those paralyzed by the bombs were forced to flee into the mountains to hide from the soon-to-come NATO forces. Irshad and her 6 children are among those who escaped safely from the burning Mujahideen camps. The survivors felt as if they were fleeing with the Prophet Lot and his family from the fires of Sodom and Gomorrah, or fleeing from God's punishment on the day of resurrection. For the first time, after 11 years, the Australian girl Susan Peterson found herself and her children free. But their freedom is surrounded by danger from above and below. The remaining Mujahideen families were scattered everywhere. They are without any protection or any means of transportation. The foreign planes identified and destroyed every vehicle carrying the Mujahideen and their families. Therefore, the only way to escape is to use animals like donkeys and horses to travel from one place to another or to walk on foot. Under heavy aerial bombardment and constant danger, the widow Irshad and her 6 children somehow managed to cross the border and enter the Swat Valley in Pakistan. The Australian girl hid her identity and decided not to mention that her late husband was one of those 19 terrorists who hijacked and crashed passenger planes in the New York Twin Towers and killed about 3,000 innocent people. Nor did she say that she was born and raised in Sydney, Australia. She learned a good lesson from her previous mistake by revealing her identity and association with Mujahideen terrorists in her interview at the Australian Embassy in Islamabad city in Pakistan. She even concealed her appearance as a Western foreign blonde woman through the Islamic veil. No one can identify any of the Taliban and Al-Qaeda Mujahideen women through the ugly Islamic burqa that hides her like a coffin from head to toe. The human female is God's most beautiful creation, but the misogynistic teachings of Islam made her a fearsome ghost. Accordingly, everyone who saw Irshad thought she was an Afghan woman. The journey from Afghanistan to Pakistan is the hardest and most dangerous journey that humans can take. It lasted several days and Irshad's children fell ill several times. It is another divine miracle that the Australian widow and her children were able to cross those mountains and valleys without losing any of her 6 young children. Once they reached Swat Valley, the White Mother and her 6 children joined the Afghan refugee camps. Irshad deliberately changed her name to Aman and her last name to Atta. She does not want anyone to know her former name and her relationship with her Arab terrorist husband, Mustafa Al-Shamari. She told the UN authorities in the refugee camps that her husband died during air raids on the Mujahideen camps in Kandahar city in Afghanistan. Moreover, she hid her native Australian and claimed that she was born and brought up in the USA. The UN authorities believed her words and did not attempt to verify her claim. The truth of the matter is that Aman Atta is the name of the second Muslim wife that her Saudi husband Mustafa married while she was staying with him in his home country of Saudi Arabia. Out of sympathy, the kind-hearted foreign widow, Irshad, decided to honor the innocent minor Saudi girl who died while giving birth with her infant child. It was her evil husband who prevented her from going to the hospital and having a cesarean operation due to her inability to deliver naturally at the early age of 15. The Australian white foreign woman Irshad Al-Shamri, who became the American mother Aman Atta, expected that the refugee camp authorities would keep them temporarily and then send them for resettlement in a Western country. She knew that her late Arab husband and his Saudi family had arrived in Australia as resettled refugees from Jordan. Therefore, Aman believed that every refugee would end up in a Western country. However, Aman learned from the authorities of the United Nations that once Afghanistan is recaptured from the Taliban and al-Qaeda terrorists, the Afghan refugees will be repatriated. Afghanistan is the last place on earth the American widow would want to return to and raise her 6 children in that primitive society and among those dangerous Islamic terrorists. Her main objective is to escape from those infernal tents and go to the West. To realize this dream, Iman has to escape from Pakistan. But her dream seemed impossible to achieve without passports and visas. She knew that the Australian embassy in Islamabad would recognize her and again reject her application. Therefore, Iman understood that the only way to escape from Pakistan was to smuggle herself and her 6 children across the Pakistan-India border. Crossing into India from Pakistan without official papers would be tantamount to passing through the disputed territory of Jammu and Kashmir provinces. Passing through the Valley of the Shadow of Death is less dangerous than venturing into that disputed territory between Hindus and Muslims. There are hundreds of Pakistani Islamic terrorist groups fighting for the liberation of Kashmir from India. The most dangerous of these terrorist groups are the fighters of Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Muhammad. Lashkar-e-Taiba is responsible for all the bombings that took place in major cities in India such as Bombay, New Delhi, and Ahmedabad, killing thousands of innocent Indian people. Although some Afghan families have warned the beautiful foreign mother, Aman Atta, of what would happen to her if she fled alone with her young without armed persons to protect them, she is determined to take the risk and make her journey to India through the disputed region of Jammu and Kashmir. This route is used by drug traffickers as well as Pakistani terrorists who smuggle themselves into India for suicide missions. Therefore, anyone caught by the Indian Army crossing those areas without official papers is held as a Pakistani spy or a Muslim terrorist. If he escaped death, he would be thrown behind bars indefinitely and tortured day and night until he breathed his last inside the cell. Iman started her journey with truly little knowledge of the area and extraordinarily little money on hand. She needed God's providence to help her afford her perilous escape and buy food for her 6 children. Her progress was at a terribly slow pace and was surrounded by all kinds of difficulties and dangers. Iman and her children have to endure many hardships during their journey through the snowy mountains that have a deadly winter cold. Sometimes, they have to hide from the military patrol soldiers on the Indian border with the enemy country Pakistan. During their flight from Afghanistan, Iman and her children did not suffer much and did not face the constant danger they were exposed to on the Pakistan-India border. At least at that time, they were accompanied by thousands of displaced Afghan families. But this time, they are left alone to continue their uncertain and dangerous exit from Pakistan until they reach the country of India alive. During that dangerous journey, the beautiful blonde, white Australian widow Aman Atta was robbed, raped, beaten, and deprived of 2 of her 6 children. The details of the sexual abuse and physical suffering that Aman and her 6 children went through during their journey from Pakistan to India is an unpleasant story to tell because it is horribly painful and makes the eyes and hearts ache for those who hear it. Suffice it to mention that some of the terrorists of Lashkar-e-Taiba kidnapped the 2 eldest sons of Mother Iman, with the intention of recruiting them into the Islamic Jihad movement for the sake of God. No matter how much she cried and begged the terrorists, she could not stop them from taking 2 of her male children. The foreign widow can forget and forgive all the abuse she suffered in the Muslim world, except for the kidnapping of her 2 sons on the Pakistan-India border. Another assault that she could not erase from her memory was the brutal rape she was subjected to by some Indian military soldiers. As soon as the beautiful and sexy blonde Australian girl Aman Atta and her 4 remaining children with her crossed the border of the Islamic State of Pakistan and entered the land of India, they were picked up by a military truck belonging to the Indian forces patrolling. At first, They accused her of being a Pakistani Muslim spy and put her in their military prison in Kashmir. Then they brutally gang-raped her and beat her severely. If Aman Atta had not been a Western blonde foreign woman, they would have killed her to cover up the crime of their repeated gang rape of her white, sexy, naked body. The American woman and her 4 children were then imprisoned for a month in a military detention facility before being transferred from Kashmir to a prison in New Delhi. Suspected Muslim woman Aman Atta is now on trial in the capital city of Hindustan on charges of illegally entering the country and spying for Pakistan. Normally, if a person is charged in India with a serious charge such as spying for Pakistan, he or she will be kept in pretrial detention for 3 to 5 years before being brought to a criminal court and sentenced. After such a long imprisonment, the suspect will not be compensated whether he is convicted or acquitted. The Western foreign widow detained in the investigation cell and her 4 children would have become like rotten eggs or rotten tomatoes in the filthy Indian jail and would have died like stray dogs had it not been for one of the human rights activists who visited New Delhi's Central Women's Prison and saw them there. The Indian human rights activist conducted an interview with the white foreigner Aman, and the interview was later published in a famous newspaper called Times of India. Through the eye-catching newspaper article, the United Nations Refugee Office in New Delhi learns of the case of a white foreign woman and her 4 young children who are accused of spying for the enemy country, Pakistan. Then the UN office appointed a lawyer for the American mother and asked the court to expedite her trial. Accordingly, within 2 months, the foreign woman Aman Atta was tried and acquitted due to lack of evidence. Then the United Nations office accepted and recognized the refugee status of the American mother, Aman Atta, who obtained it while she was in the Swat Valley in Pakistan and granted her the right to political asylum in India. She told them this orally without showing official papers, and the office was not assigned to contact its counterpart in Pakistan and investigate the matter of the American refugee widow, Aman Atta. Moreover, the office helped her rent an apartment and promised to pay her monthly rent and provide financial assistance to her and her 4 children on a regular basis. In addition, the United Nations office accepted Aman's claim that she is from America without investigating this matter either. Soon after, the UN office referred her case and her children to the U.S. Embassy and requested that they be granted American passports and sent to their home country, the United States of America. The UN office made these arrangements without informing the foreign refugee woman Aman Atta. The Australian widow Ershad was surprised when she received a letter from the U.S. Embassy inviting her for an interview. Before she went for the interview, she called the United Nations office, and from them Aman learned that they were the ones who referred her case to the U.S. Embassy. The Australian widow Ershad found herself in an inconvenient situation. She fears that the U.S. Embassy will discover that there is no record of her birth in the United States. She doesn't even know what address to give as the place where she lived when she was in America, as she falsely claimed. As expected, the refugee Aman Atta was unable to prove her claim that she was born and raised in America, even though she had forged an address in the United States of America and told them about it. She thought the Americans would just believe her words without trying to verify them, as UN officials had done with her before. The U.S. Embassy staff discovered that the address she had given them belonged to an American family that had no children. Also, the name of her father, Frank Peterson, and her maiden name, Susan Peterson, before converting to Islam and changing her name to Aman Atta, are not found in that address. The truth of the matter is that the embassy obtained these details about her past life from the file she mentioned when she was questioned by female staff of the UN office. When Aman failed to substantiate her claim of being American, her application for resettlement in the United States was denied. However, the U.S. Embassy did not try to take the matter further and prosecute the refugee Aman Atta for lying in her application. However, the U.S. Embassy informed the UN office that Aman is lying about her claim that she is originally an American citizen. Although she had lied in her application, the UN office did not revoke her status as a foreign refugee in India nor stop her and her children from being supported. Moreover, the UN office did not attempt to find out the identity of the white woman, Aman Atta, prior to her conversion from Christianity to Islam. UN officials knew that it was a widespread practice among persecuted Muslim refugees from Africa and Asia to provide false information to be sent for resettlement to Europe, America, Canada, New Zealand, and Australia. Even those illegally displaced people who smuggle themselves in rickety boats across the Mediterranean Sea will not be imprisoned or brought back to their home countries when they are caught across the European coast. Rather, they will be treated as persecuted refugees, granted asylum in European countries, placed in refugee camps, and then resettled in America, Canada, New Zealand, or Australia.